Hello everyone and welcome to Jamie TV, streaming 100% live on YouTube and trying desperately hard not to pissy pants about too much. I have the chat open here to my left, so I'm just going to make sure that the stream seems to be working here. If anyone could just type in the chat to just let me know. I'm seeing the stream on my screen. It looks okay. If you could type in the chat just to let me know that you can hear my voice okay, and it would seem to be, yeah, everything seems to be in order here. But just let me know, okay? It's nice and reassuring. All right then. So, as you can see, I am set up with the view you have today is just of the iPad. Now I was going to set up a little differently. What I was going to do was to use my nano control whilst mixing today. Last night what I did was, because if you've seen my previous streams in this series, you will have seen me using the nano control, mapping it and then forgetting to use it because I'm so used to using the screen. And I was going to show you the way I set it up was the nano controller's got 4 scenes, and mine's the old one which has 9 faders. The new one has 8. But the advantage with the new one is you don't need to do any mapping yourself. You can just kind of, I think you hold down a button and unplug the lead, turn around 3 times, say some magic words, plug it back in, and it's all mapped for you. Mine doesn't do that, but it does have 4 scenes, so you can have like you can have 4 lots of 9 faders. So what's that? That's 36, is it? My maths is not the best. So what I got was, instead of like going to the beginning of my desk and like mapping the first 9 and then mapping the next 9 and then the next 9, if there are indeed 9 left there, what I did was I mapped, there are 8 drum tracks and then a group track for the drums. So I mapped those 9 to the first scene, and then to the second scene I mapped only the congas, so didn't use the last couple of faders, and then on the last one I mapped everything else. So I was going to use it that way, but then I thought, the best thing for you guys for this stream is to be able to see things on the screen as clearly as possible. So I thought, right, I'll not use the nano control. I am going to use it for just one thing today, and that is so that I can mute or change the volume of my speaking voice without touching the screen, because sometimes I might be wanting to mute it and I might be not on the right bit of the desk, so rather than scrolling across all the time, I can just do it out here, which you won't see. Okay, now we reached a point yesterday where I'd got the vocal down and I got the guitar down and I got a sound for both that I was fairly happy with, but I'd not frozen those tracks because I just wanted to kind of live with those tracks for a while. Now what I've done is I now have frozen both of those off, but what I did was I did a save. I did a duplicate project before I did that, so that if I decide I'm not happy with those sounds, I can always go back and I can change them. But I thought I'd get them frozen off because I would need the processing power. So let me just come down here, and another thing that I did since yesterday's stream was I went through the drums and I chopped out, hopefully, all of the counts, because this song has a number of stops in it, and so I'd put some hats and sometimes rides in there just to give me a 4 count to come back in when I was recording the bass and the guitars. So I've been through and I've chopped those out, and that's why you're seeing bits missing here from the hats, and I also found that I've got a random hat somewhere that probably shouldn't be there. Where is that? Did I chop it? I think I chopped it out, actually. Let's just see. No, it's there, look. Yeah, I've got a random hat here. So, and I've not had time to explore that, why that's there yet, but I think that one's chopping out. So what I've done is, like I said I would, I've already got a sound for some of those drums, and I'm going to go through them and I'm going to show you what I've used to enhance the drum sound, and I'm going to then continue and get sounds for the other drums, because the piano and organ are finished sounds, the two guitars are finished sounds, the solo and the vocal hopefully are finished sounds. This is one of the limitations. Can you unfreeze tracks in Cubasis? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And you have some options about what happens when you unfreeze. So let's just take one that I've just recently frozen. So, where are we? Right, so the solo, for instance, I pressed the freeze button on the original track to freeze it, right? I don't know why I struggle for that word. And then if I want to unfreeze it, I would press the freeze button again. But that wouldn't work in this project, because what I've done is everything that I've frozen, I've deleted off. Because when you've frozen a track, the frozen track is supposed to be not affecting the DSP of your project. And so what I used to do was the frozen tracks, I would just drag them down to the bottom of the project in case I needed to use them again. But I'm not convinced that that's the case. I think they do affect the DSP. Now, I could be wrong, but I did do a test project where I had a number of frozen tracks and I deleted them all off, and the DSP did appear to go down slightly. So I like to delete them off. And also, because when you're mixing on an iPad, the more you have in your project, the more difficult it is, because we're dealing with a very small amount of real estate. You know, and you kind of, you know, you're scrolling about all the time, and just those extra tracks just make it that little bit more complicated on the screen. And the more you have, the more chance there is that you're going to accidentally press on something and drag it, which is the biggest negative, I think, about a touchscreen device. But I do love that aspect of, because it's, you know, this is my music that I've recorded here, and I can get my fingers into it and manipulate it, and that to me just seems, I don't know, I feel just much more involved in the music than, you know, clicking with a mouse on the computer. I really enjoy that part of it. But anyway, so what I've done is I've for several of the drum sounds, I've already been and added some effects, as you'll see. I've got inserts and sends. Now, I need to talk about inserts and sends. I need to remember to mention that. But first, I just want to show you. Now, I did think, by the way, that it would be nice if I got some sounds and then I mixed the project roughly again, just so that I could play it for you at the beginning of the stream, and then show you, and then get into the sounds and show you how they worked. But I didn't get as far as doing that. So at the moment the mix is a mess, because I've been getting sounds and the levels have changed. So we'll go through the sounds one by one and we'll gradually do the mix. But I do just want to show you, if I press here, we've got system information, and as you can see, CPU at the moment is sitting very, very low, but DSP, the project's not even playing, and it's well, it's all over the place. And it's kind of peaking at around 70%, slightly more at times. So let me just play the project. I hope nothing's going to be too loud, but I just want you to see what happens when I do.
To be through troubled times, we'll stand together. Whatever they throw at us will last for.
Right, so as you can hear, the mix is nothing like at the moment. Now the DSP there was approaching like 80-85%. Yes, so at this point I don't want to be opening any more AUV3s until I've done some more freezing. So we're going to be, fingers crossed, doing some freezing shortly. Now, before I do anything else, I just want to mention something about inserts and sends, because recently I've been asked questions about inserts and sends by quite a number of people, and some of those people were people who I thought would know about this stuff, and it's something that I've taken for granted that people know, right? So I'll cover it here just in case anyone watches this that needs to know this stuff. So basically, if you insert an effect, right, it's only going to affect that one instrument. So like here, I've used the 6144 EQ on the kick and FAC transient, so they are just working on the kick, and I haven't sent any sends. I separate effects out like this. I would, if I'm applying a reverb or a delay, then that's going to be on a send, right? Pretty much everything else is going to be an insert, unless it's something that I decide to use globally on a number of instruments. Now, whether you choose to use an effect as an insert or a send, you can achieve the same sound, but you can save yourself some processing power by using sends appropriately, right? So basically, if you're choosing an effect for one instrument, put it on an insert. If you're choosing an instrument that you're going to apply to a number, let me say that again. If you're choosing an effect that you're going to apply to a number of instruments, put it on a send. That way, like here, I'm using cleverb on the snare. Now, I'm most likely going to send all of my drums and congas to cleverb. The idea is to send them all to the same reverb to create a kind of room kind of a sound, so that it sounds like a real drum kit being played in a room. If I was making something like more experimental, or if I was making electronic music, I might use different reverbs, because you're looking for a totally different sound. But here, I find cleverb is a really nice reverb to make, to get that kind of effect, that old school kind of we're in a room kind of effect, right? I could have said that better, but I think you know what I mean. And if I open it as a send, it's open once, and then every time I want to send a sound to cleverb, like I've sent the hats there, the tambourine there, and other drums, it's just been sent to the same effect. So it's open one time, and that's saving us some DSP. So that's how we would use it, and that's why when I use Mixbox as an insert to get me a sound, right, I'm not going to use the reverb on it unless that reverb, because the reverbs in Mixbox are really nice. But what I would do if I use Mixbox on a drum, right, then what I would do is I would deactivate the reverb in that preset that I'm using, or in that sound that I've built. I just wouldn't add a reverb, and then I would use a send to send it to the same reverb that I'm sending all the other drums to. Now with the vocal, even though it was Mixbox in on an insert, I did use the reverb in that because I want to use that reverb just for that one sound, and it doesn't affect. It's not detrimental to not put the reverb on a send if you're using it for one instrument, right? So I hope that makes some sense. If you have any questions about those things, then by all means shout up, and I shall do my best to answer. So the kick, as you will see, there's no send on it because for me, I don't put reverb on drums. Hi Paul, thank you for joining us. I don't put reverb on the kick because I want that kick to be very, very clear without being too loud. And I find that when I add the reverb to a low frequency, it sort of makes it a little bit more difficult to hear in the mix. It adds lows to a low frequency. You're not really hearing that reverb in a mix, it's just making it more difficult to mix. So I don't put any reverb on the kick. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like particularly using drum loops for finished projects, for like proper recordings. By all means, I use drum loops a lot for demos and stuff. But I like to be able to manipulate each drum individually. And for me, adding reverb to a drum loop, it's kind of, it's all right, but I want to be able to say how much of each component part of the kit is going to the reverb. So on the kick, I have the 6144 EQ and I have FAC transient. And let me show you why I chose those things. So if I just put my hand over here, I can solo my voice. Okay, and then I can solo the kick. And if we go to the beginning of the project, I could use this. There we go. And I'll take the effects off and press play. Go to the mixer, scoot along to the kick right at the beginning of the project. That's where I usually put it. This is a thing I really like about Cubasis. When you select one of the faders, then it moves the project to that instrument. Oh, actually, I missed something. Sorry, I missed something when I was talking about freezing. Forgive me. Yes. So in this project, because I've deleted off the tracks that I froze, if I press the freeze button, it wouldn't unfreeze that particular instrument. But normally, if I hadn't deleted it, then when I press the freeze button again, it would unfreeze it. So the AUV3s would be open again and the original track would reappear. And you have some options in setup. Where are they? In audio? Not in audio. Mix down and freeze. Okay, so you have some options here over freezing, and one of them is, where are we? Unfreeze deletes audio track, right? So you can set it so that when you press unfreeze, it deletes off the audio that you froze. Or if you don't set that, I don't have that set, what it will do is it will give you the unfrozen track again, but you keep the track that was frozen. And that, I like it that way, because then when I make my adjustments and I freeze again, I can compare the newly frozen track against the one that I wasn't happy with. So, right. Okay, Mick. Take care, mate. See you later. Thank you for being here. Paul is asking me, how is Cubasis 3 doing? Is it still buggy? Well, you know what? Right, Cubasis 3, we read loads and loads and loads about how buggy it is. And I have, I must be like the number one thorn in Steinberg's side, or at least certainly for a long time there I was. It's nothing like as buggy as it was when they first released it, when they released it about a year prematurely, which I think was a very, very unfair thing to do to the iOS musicians, you know. It really wasn't anything like ready for release. And now the way that I work, I don't have many problems. But I suppose that to some extent the way that I work is because I know of the limitations of Cubasis 3. Now, for me, Cubasis 3 has reached a point now where I will use it over Cubasis 2 because of all the new features, and the new features are awesome. The MIDI learn is brilliant. The sidechaining is fantastic, and the multi-out, that's just like that for me is a game changer. Wonderful. And it handles AUV3s at least as well as Cubasis 2 now, if not slightly better. And I very rarely have a crash. There are some issues, some buggy things that happen, but they are the kind of things that happen when you're using a lot of AUV3s and maybe a lot of the kind of processing that you might be doing if you were making electronic dance music, or you know, more kind of synthetic music. For the kind of way that I work, where I work with a lot of real audio, and then things like drums I have to use, you know, because I don't play drums, I have to use AUV3s to create my drums, but I get them turned to real audio as soon as I can, because the number one mistake that everyone is making with Cubasis 3 is expecting it to handle far more AUV3s than is realistic. And I know it annoys some people when I say that, but people are saying, oh, you know, other apps can cope with more. Well, Audio Pro cannot handle more. Audio Pro crashes every time I look at it. And Zenbeats, I don't use tons, but I do keep experimenting with it, and actually it probably does handle AUV3s slightly better than Cubasis. But it's not by, you know, a country mile, it's only slightly. And Audio Evolution handles AUV3s a little better than Cubasis, but again, it's not massively more. And there are a lot of features that Cubasis 3 has that Audio Evolution doesn't have. Although that app is a brilliant app, and I'm going to be using that more. But you know, each door is brilliant for its own reasons and also has its own flaws. If there's something that does worry me about Cubasis 3, it's that people who have vastly superior iPads to what I have here, which is only a 2017 5th gen normal iPad, seem to have exactly the same issues as I have, and I don't understand why it doesn't work massively better on those iPads. The only place where you can use hugely more AUV3s at any one time than you can in Cubasis 3 is in AUM, and AUM is a totally different environment. It's an environment that I absolutely love working in. In fact, my number one passion when making iOS music at the moment is using AUM as a digital audio workstation. And I find having Cubasis 3 as the traditional door and having AUM as the sort of more experimental, you know, more sort of open kind of environment is a nice balance. Okay, so let's get back to the kick. So I was playing it with no effects on. I'm going to bring up the volume of it. So there you have the sample with no effects on. Hi Grant, thank you for joining us, sir. We're just listening to a drum sample with no effects on it. Right, and then what I did was I added the 6144 EQ. Now what I've done with that is I've used the high pass filter to get rid of those low frequencies that we really do not need to be in the mix. Some people think that the kick drum needs to have those oomph frequencies. It doesn't. And I've just sort of pissy panted around with the EQ, dialing out some more lows here and searching around for those frequencies that maybe don't sound quite so nice, and dipping them out a little bit and enhancing the ones that help the kick to cut through. So like, say for instance, oh, and the way that I do that is what I will do is I will apply a little boost first. So where are we for an example? Okay, so here in this mid frequency, here I've added a slight boost in gain to that frequency, so that when I'm sweeping around with the Q, I can hear what happens if I boost that particular frequency. And then if I find a nasty frequency, I can then reduce the gain, maybe take it into the negative to cut some of that frequency out. Or if it's a good frequency that's helping everything cut, I will boost it, right? So as you can hear, this effect has lost some low, boosted some other frequencies, and it has also brought up the volume. Now, let's... Sorry, I'm reading the chat. Well, are we talking about GarageBand? GarageBand is underrated. Yes, it is. GarageBand is actually quite brilliant. And actually, right, GarageBand is something I ought to use more and explore more. I think one of the reasons why I don't, right, is because Pete Johns, right, and also Patrick at the GarageBand Guide, both have kind of made their channels very, very successful by focusing mainly on GarageBand, and they do a fabulous job of it. They're both brilliant YouTubers and really do show off what GarageBand is capable of. And you know, there's no need for me to do that as well. I'm much more familiar with Cubasis, so it's probably kind of down to me to be, you know, the guy who speaks about Cubasis. But but you know, GarageBand does have some fantastic qualities, and I've found it to be, you know, pretty damn stable. The thing that put me off GarageBand in the first place, which I know this was probably really silly, but when I first got an iPad and I started experimenting with GarageBand, because that's what you do, because it's free, I was really put off. I'm a little bit ashamed to say this, actually. I was really put off by the sort of on-screen playing instruments, you know, and all the things that kind of it allows you to do without really having to play anything, or, you know, being a musician. It kind of it sort of seemed like a bit like a learner's door. You know, it would be great for teaching kids. But then, of course, you know, if you look past all of those things and just look at what it can do as a door, it's actually quite brilliant, you know. And what's wrong with playing on-screen instruments? You know, if you end up with a great sounding thing and making a tune with it, then what's wrong with that? You know, The only thing that matters at the end of the day is the sound coming out of the speakers pleasing? Could somebody kind of get into that and tap the foot to it and enjoy it? Well, that's all that really matters. So it was maybe a little bit of my musician pomposity that kind of led me away from GarageBand, and I looked at Audio Pro, and could never kind of get it to work for 5 minutes without crashing, and ended up getting Cubasis 2. So anyway, right, so the 6144 has kind of cut off the lows from the kick, but really sort of beefed it up. And then what I did was I added FAC transient, and with this I've been able to achieve kind of two things. The idea of FAC transient on a kick for me is to make it punch more. In fact, I'll take the 6144 off, right, back to transient. So if I switch it off, and then I'll switch it on while it's playing. Right, so this sample has a tail to it that I don't like. I like the sound of this kick, but you hear that sort of after it, you know, and I thought, you know, I want to see if I can get rid of that. Maybe I should try and gate it. So I added transient to make it sort of punch more, and then I thought, right, what I'll do is I'll add a gate as well. But then I found in transient, and I'd not spotted that transient could do this before, by playing with the hang on a minute, let me just do this. Bear with. It's not going to do it. It does another view. I can't remember how to get to the other view. You've only got the same features, but I just kind of like how it looks that way. Alright, stop pissy panting about. So, if you look here at the sustain, right, if I take this depth back up, right, so that tail is back in. And you can also adjust the time, and it gives you like a gate, which is marvelous. So I've got transient doing two jobs in one for me. It's making it more punchy, and it's also cutting off that tail. Put the EQ back in, and now we've got a really solid sounding kick that I'm very happy with. Now, the snare. The snare only plays for part of the project, so let's get onto a bit where it's not going to keep cutting out on us. I could set up a loop actually to help us with that. There we go. Bit of a loop around the snare area. Let's snap that to bar. Oh, a bit far there. Right. That should do us. Put the loop on, and then right, now snare. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Okay, so let's lose Mixbox. Oops, pressed the wrong button. There. In fact, let's lose the send as well. Right, okay, so I'm going to need this to go up in volume a bit. Right, okay, so I've got a preset that I built in Mixbox for a previous project, which is called No Pissy Pants Snare, which is one of the many Mixbox presets that I've shared at my Patreon account, and I'm going to just switch off everything that I have in this preset. Okay, so that's the raw sample sound. And here I've added saturator subtly, very subtly, just to give it a bit more bite, a bit more grit. It's not an awful lot, but then we bring in the compressor. Now, although that's squashing the sound and kind of filling it out nicely, this also enhanced a frequency. It's exaggerated a low frequency that I don't want to be there. So I used this British EQ to lose it again and to push up some of the not ever so high frequencies, but just the sort of upper mids to help it cut through a mix. And I was using this plate reverb, and then I realized that I don't actually need it, so we'll lose that. And then of course I sent it to Cleverb, which, hang on, I didn't, there we go. There's a slight glitchiness there from the resizing of the reverb, maybe due to the DSP that we're using. But this is actually just a preset. I've not made any adjustments to this at all. This is just the medium hall preset. And what I do is when I'm looking for a reverb for my drums that I'm going to send all of the drums to, and what I do is I use the snare, because it's the snare where the reverb is going to be most prominent. Now, I have no idea if other people work like this. I don't know if this is a good way to work, but this is what I do. The reverb is most prominent on the snare, so I use the snare to find a reverb that I really like, that I think is going to suit the track. And I probably kind of exaggerate it a little bit too much in the first place and then bring it down. Okay, so this preset to me sounds fantastic, so I didn't pissy pants around with it. And then we move on to the hats, which I'll take off the Cleverb for the moment and show you what we've got here. Now this one was a difficult one. These samples are not expansive samples, they're not high fidelity ones, and the limitations of the way that they've been recorded and the quality of them becomes very apparent when you start to try and manipulate them. Now I do have better quality samples, but I like the sound of these samples for this kind of track. So, and you know what, it's not always about the quality of a sample or the quality of an instrument. It's the way you use it, what you do with it, that matters. So let's just kind of get a loop going around some hats, and then I can show you. So we'll just put that there and here, about there I think, right? And then let's hear the hats just raw. Now the reason I like the sample is because it's, you know, it sounds like a real hi-hat, and it's not beautifully recorded or anything. It kind of sounds like a hi-hat, you know, just a real hi-hat being hit by a real drummer. It's got the kind of vibe I want, but it's not ever so fantastic quality. And when I used a few different plugins on this before I got something I liked, and what I ended up doing was I used Bliss compressor. Now Bliss are basically considered like one of the finest developers for iOS apps, right? And they do get an awful lot of praise, and quite rightly so. But the compressor is one that people seem to rarely mention, and it is superb. It's absolutely wonderful. And I used it to do this. let's just open it up. And right, so there, the hat is raw. Now, that's kind of, it's brought it up a lot in volume, I know. But it's also, it's really kind of that squashing that it's, in fact, let me just move a few things around and I'll show you. Maybe I should just bring the volume down a little bit now that we've got the compressor on. Right, okay, let me show you. So, threshold, right? Bringing down that threshold and hearing what happens as it starts to crush. And the attack, as I bring the attack down, it just makes it cut more, it makes it bite more. The lowest release we can possibly have. And the ratio I took up way high, much higher than I normally would use a ratio. And then what I did was I thought what I want for this hat is, right, for me, when I listen to hi-hats, when a real drummer is playing them, you know, kind of thrashing them constantly, there's a distortion to that sound that doesn't translate to a drum sample. And maybe that's just something that I imagine I'm hearing, I don't know, but I like to add a little bit of dirt sometimes to hats. I think that it helps with them cutting through, and it's just a sound I dig. And when the hat is played, you know, over a snare, just that, it works for me. So I used a few different apps, and I wasn't happy with what I found at all. And then I remembered this one, because people tend to think of the Nembrini apps as being solely for guitar, but they're not. And this PSA 1000 Junior is useful for a whole bunch of things. I mean, in truth, you could use this or the other version, the stereo one, whichever you prefer to use. You could use this to do a whole drum kit. You can use this on synths. You'd use the stereo one on the synth, I guess, but you know, it's great on synth basses. It's a wonderful, wonderful app. And what you'll see here is I've used it. I've brought the preamp up to make it drive a little, and then I've actually dialed out all of the lows and boosted the drive here. I've taken all the low EQ out and pushed up the highs, and then the wet and dry mix is what I'm using to blend this in. So it's not, you know, it's nothing like 100% wet. I'll make it all the way over to dry and then blend it in. So what it's doing is it's bringing in that, just that little bit of dirt, that little bit of overdrive, and it's also, because it's saturating it, it's just making it a little bit softer sounding, because, you know, hat samples can tend to sound a little bit rigid. So that is then going, of course, to Cleaver. There's probably a bit much of it on there. And because you're using Ascend and you're using one preset, or, you know, if you're using one setting in an app as Ascend, then the way that you adjust how much reverb you're getting from each thing that you're sending to that app is just by the level that you use in the send effect. So now here is something that I was not entirely happy with, and I'm not 100% happy with it now. The jury's still out on this for me. I put this tambourine in the chorus, and what I did was where I just I wanted another layer, like another layer of percussion, something that would just be subtle, but just like another thing in the sound. And I love to put a tambourine in this kind of track, but I found a sample that I kind of liked. But what I should have done is, when I put the MIDI part in, I should have played around with the volume of each one to give it more feel. And as you'll hear, it's actually incredibly rigid the way it is. I'll just switch off the effects to let you hear the sample. There are no accents. There's no human quality to that whatsoever. It's something I totally neglected. Now, it might be that in the mix it actually sounds okay. I don't know yet because we've not got there yet. But I wanted to just kind of give it a lift, make it a little bit more exciting. And I tried a couple of things, and then I remembered beef. And all I'm using in beef is I'm using the EQ just to push up some of those sort of slightly higher mids. And I've used the overdrive saturation just to kind of saturate it a little, I guess. And I've increased the attack slightly. And that's it. That's all I've done with it. And it just sounds a little, it blends into the mix a bit better. And when we add the reverb, it sounds thoroughly nicer than it did before. Right, now I haven't done the stick yet, but I did do the clap. Now that sounds, to me, that sounds really good. I'm really happy with that sound. Right, so let's go to the raw sound. Bring it up a little bit. Okay, now I wanted to enhance the sound of this. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I was a bit, I don't know what I want to do with that. I want it to sound better. I just want it to be better, and so I went with kind of, possibly the other, because there's beef and there's woot, and they're probably the two most favourite magic source kind of apps now for iOS. So I went with woot because I'd already used beef on something, and I just like to use different things. And so if I just open up woot, and I didn't know what I was looking for, so I just had a little jog through some presets, and they all sounded rubbish until I got to this one. Press the wrong button, sorry. So switch it on. Right. So it adds a something, quite liking it. And then I added the cleaver. I'm like, now it's starting to sound like something. Because there's kind of like a middle. It's like a middle that really emphasizes it when I add that woot. I find it difficult to put into words what it is, but you can hear that extra something. And then I thought what it would be nice if it sounded like there were more people clapping. So all I did was I added this delay. And some of you might be about to point out something that you might say I did wrong. Okay. So I'm going to cover it just in case you're thinking it. So I added this delay, right? This great delay from Design by Paul, which sounds very much in the vein of a space echo. And it doesn't have all of the functions of a space echo, but it has the tone. Now I've dialed all the reverb out of it, and all I've done is I've given it kind of a slapback time length and brought the feedbacks down. When I first switched it on, it sounded like this. I mean, that sounds brilliant, but not for this kind of track, but it's a great sound. I just brought the feedbacks down. Right, now it just sounds a bit more like there's more people clapping. See if I could get away with a slightly longer time length. It's a great sound, but it's not really what I'm looking for. There. Now, I put my sends in the wrong order. And really, delay ought to be before reverb. Really, reverb is meant to be last. But you know what? I kind of, you can't move them in the sends, and I can't change it around without setting up the reverb again for all the instruments I've already done, and actually it sounds all right, right? It sounds okay. So I'm just going to leave it because it sounds all right. And that's what I've done with the drums so far. So, oops. Right. That undo really is a godsend. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to freeze some stuff off, because if I don't, we're going to start crashing. Now you can see there the amount of AV3s I've got open. I've not counted them, but there's a number there open, and Cubasis 3 is running alright. But I know that if I push it much further, we're going to have a crash. So it's time to freeze. Now, in a stream a few days ago, I attempted to freeze a guitar, and it took 80 years. But since then, all the freezing I've done has been okay. So let's just do one, and if it like takes a ridiculous length of time, I'll do a shadow puppet show or something. Let's see what happens. I'm just gonna move my handles. Yeah, we're on snap to bar. I'm gonna go there and over here. All right, and then let's freeze this kick. 222. Oh, right. Okay. For some reason, I forgot. I forgot that for some reason when you do a freeze, it it takes, if you've got a channel sort of the audio in activated, it takes it off for some reason. Really, surely there's no need to do that. Now, of course, you may have already realised that I kind of made a bit of a grievous error there, and I'm just going to have a look now and see if we got away with it. I did not check the volume of the kick before I froze it. Now, it doesn't look like it's peaked too highly. We might just have got away with it. So let's just have a solo of that kick and see. Okay, so it's we got away with it. I just got it turned up a bit loud. First, I thought it was distorting, but that's okay, right? It's all right. So I must remember for any I do in future to check that. Right. So I'm going to delete this off. Right, and when I do that, we should be saving on some DSP. Now I could do with doing, some more. That freeze took kind of much longer than I'd like in a live stream. So I'm a little bit disconcerted about that. Let's get another one done so that I've got a little bit of headroom. I'm just thinking.
Through trouble.
I think I'll do the tambourine because it's kind of less consequential, and there's only beef and cleaver on it. Shouldn't take too long. If I can get that one done and get that deleted off, and then hopefully we'll be able to proceed and get the rest of the drums done. Right, so I'm going to freeze, and I realised that I've not really got any shadow puppets in here, and I'm sat in the dark to give you the best possible shot of the screen. So I kind of like. The only thing I could put my hand on was a Lego Spider-Man and a canine. So I'm going to freeze this, and if it's taking a little while, I'll talk to you in the chat by typing. Yeah, what I was trying to say earlier about when Cubasis 3 deactivates your basically your monitor button for some audio in, like here I've got my microphone into channel 2 of my iRig Pro Duo. That's what's coming up here, and I press the monitor button so that you can hear me, right? So what happens is when you've done a freeze, that's no longer activated, but it's still lit up. And you have to switch it off and back on again. I don't know why I demonstrated that while I were talking. I mean, how stupid can you get, really? Right, now, that freeze was a little quicker than the kick. And I was thinking, while it was happening, there's actually reverb on it, which usually takes longer to freeze. Paul pointed out in the chat that the volumes on the mix have no effect on the freeze. That's correct. The volumes that affect the freeze are the volumes from within AUV3s and effects. So if you freeze something and it's distorted and too loud, you don't want to change the volume on the fader. You want to change the volume. Let's say if it's a synth, you go into the synth. Let's say it's tal. Go into tal. Find the master volume inside of tal. Cut that back, right? And by the way, if you don't have tal, if you like 80s synths, it's awesome. It's a Juno on your iPad, and they've added reverb and delay, which of course the Juno didn't have. But I mean, they sound wonderful, So, yeah, highly recommended. Right, so let's just listen to this tambourine, see if it kind of came out all right. That came out all right. I'm liking that. That's good. All right, so I'm going to delete that one. And right, so that's another track gone. That's some more AV3s gone. And I was thinking, maybe because we'd deleted off the kick and that was like 2 AV3s closed, and then there's a bit more headroom, maybe that's why the tambourine was quicker. So encouraged by that, I think I may just do one more freeze to give us some space so that I can continue the way I want to. So what shall we do? The snare I would like to leave for a little while, because I'm very precious about the amount of reverb on a snare. I want to be able to adjust that a little bit later into mixing. So let's have a look at the hats maybe. Let's just see. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna freeze that one off, and then we'll continue. I didn't investigate the random hat, did I? Let's just hang on a minute. I'm just going to leave it. It's not noticeably bad or wrong or anything. I'm just going to leave it. And I could still get rid of it later if I need to. Let's get on with freezing. So let's just check what the level is like. Right, okay. The level is looking a little high on the desk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into the compressor, and I'm just going to take the gain down a little bit. Just play that one more time. Yeah, that's not going to hurt any. There's still going to be plenty of level on that, I'm sure. So I'm going to freeze that, and then we can proceed. Right, okay. Didn't take too long, I guess. Let's have a listen and see what that's like. Okay, I'm liking that. Now, obviously, if I was, if thank you, Nobat, time for a bath. Yes, Paul. Now, if I was not live streaming, right, I would sit with the instrument soloed and I would listen all the way through to ensure that it's okay all the way through and there are no glitches. But as I'm live streaming and I don't want you to get too bored, I'm just going to kind of just take the chance that these freezes are okay. And as you know, I can always go back to an older version of the project and drag something in and do it again and correct it if there is a problem. So I'm going to delete that. And now we should have a little bit more headroom for continuing. So snare I have not frozen yet. I've done hats, I've done tambourine. The stick, for that, what I'm going to do is, you know, like the stick sound is like the side stick on the side of the snare. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to open up Mixbox and I'm going to use the sound that I used for the snare as a starting point, and then actually point right, go to Mixbox, and I've changed the sounds in this preset that I made for another track. So what I need to do here is I need to save this preset. This is one thing that when Mixbox first came out confused quite a lot of people navigating to where you save. And sometimes what happens in the menu in Mixbox is, right, it might, when you back page, it might look like this, right, and you're like, where's save? And you have to scroll down. So we're going to save this as I'll put TTT snap. Can't spell. Okay. Save. Right, now what I can do now is I can go to the stick and open Mixbox. Now I'm not entirely sure that this will work, but I just figured, you know, the stick is like part of the snare drum, right, and the sample is from the same set, so like, I don't know, use that sound as a starting point. Maybe it might be dreadful. Let's find out. So I'm going to drums and then my Jamie Tones folder. All of this is shared at my Patreon, and now I have actually made a preset for acoustic tracks, but let's try my idea. Solo the stick. Solo my voice first with this button over here, and then the stick, and then right, let's turn that up. Right, okay, switch it on. That sounds kind of nice. It's like, it sounds like somebody hitting the side of a snare drum. I mean, it sounds a bit flat there, and now it sort of comes to life. There's a little bit of a low end ring, but I think that kind of helps it to sound like someone's hitting the side of a snare. And you know what? I don't think it's too obtrusive. probably not going to be heard in the mix. I might just take a chance with that, but let's see what it sounds like once we've added the cleaver to it. Right. Now let's put it alongside some other parts of the drum kit. Okay, so I don't know what you guys think, but I think I quite like that. It sounds quite realistic. It does have that extra little bit of low end ring though, and I don't know whether I'm going to regret it if I leave that. So just go to this EQ and let's just see if it's possible to take that out. Did I solo that? I didn't solo the track. Oh no, solo my voice, solo the stick. Put a loop around this area where there's actually a stick and play. Now where would that be? Let's see. Trying to find that. If I can boost that frequency up and find it, then I know. There. Cuts it out a little bit. Maybe just widen the cue a little bit. Yeah, I think we've found it there. Okay. I think that's better. Now, what are we looking like for DSP now when everything's playing? Whoops. Can it handle a bit more reverb, do you think? It can now that we've lost that ring. It's not gone completely, but it's lessened. I'm just thinking that if we're going to have quite a lot of reverb on the snare, as I like to have, then I'm basically using stick or snare. As you can see, the stick pretty much does the verse and pre-chorus, and then the snare takes over. No, that's a clap. And then what are you pointing to, hippie? And the snare takes over, and then it's stick, snare, stick, snare. So it's gonna, I've panned it to the same part of the stereo picture, and so it's kind of gonna need to have a similar sort of effect. So maybe if we just take that loop off, right, and then listen to the stick for a moment, right, and then the snare's going to take over, which is a bit quiet, but yeah, I think that works. Okay, Right, so DSP is not looking too bad at that. I'm going to chance it and continue and do another instrument. That may be a mistake, but you know, the first one I made. So we've got, let's see, we've done kick, snare, hats, tambourine, stick, clap. Right, we've got ride and crashes to do. So crashes, I have a preset that I made for that I really like. Let's just find an area where we've got some crashes going on. And I'm just going to set up a loop around those crashes. I haven't got an awful lot of crashes in this track really. I just didn't feel that it needed a lot. So we've got 3 close together here. We'll use this little section. Okay, right. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be pushing it here by trying this, but let's have a go with Mixbox. Yeah, we'll see if we can get away with using Mixbox one more time. So, insert effects on crashes. Mixbox, and I'm a little concerned it moved a bit slowly there. You see that there? I couldn't see my folder. It's at the top, but it was like off of the picture. Right. What have I got? I've got the no pissy pants crash sound, and I've got the very present crash sound. I think we'll go with no pissy as a starting point for this. And I'm going to immediately remove the reverb. Okay, and I already soloed it. Right, let's take that off. So here I'm using the channel strip to dial out all the very lows and boosting up the top end. And actually I found with this, because this preset was made for this sample in a previous song, I found that leaving all the middle area just as it was, which wasn't what I expected, and just boosting up the top, cutting out the lows, and it sounded absolutely fine. I've used the saturator just to make it a little bit more dirty and a little softer maybe, and the compression just to, well, compress it, and that's all that needs to be in there. It sounds good as it is, so we'll just add some cleaverb. I'm thinking, that might sound like a bit of an excessive amount of reverb, but I'm thinking because there's not tons of crashes in this, we might get away with that bit more reverb. Now, is that too much? This is the problem with mixing on iOS when you keep running out of resources. Um, you have to commit to these decisions. Of course, you're not committed. You can always go back and change it later, but I think that's going to work, and I'm gonna go with that. Um, Now, I'm not going to be able to get this ride done, I don't think, without freezing one more instrument. So I'm gonna freeze this crash, and then we'll get the ride done, and then hopefully we'll be in a position to look at start mixing the drums. So I'm just gonna do it. See how it goes. Oh, actually, no, I should check the level first. I think the level looks okay, but we're going to have plenty of volume on this. And so I'm thinking if I go to Mixbox, you'll see here the output is peaking on Mixbox. So if I take this master down, and that should be okay. And we're back. The spinning white circle of death. I was kind of wondering whether we were going to come out of that one okay. But, right, you know what I keep saying about AV3s and kind of getting a workflow that works around the limitations and real audio, etc., etc. I know I've said these things quite a lot at times in these episodes while I've been making this track, but so far, if you think like this is episode 8, and each stream has been over an hour, some have been an hour and a half, 2 hours, so it's like we've had one crash. I've just had a pop-up to say that Doug is about to stream. Now, I try not to ever clash with Doug when I stream, but he streams at 2:30. So, so I'm going to continue with what I'm doing. Right. So because before I started doing this, we did have a conversation about it, because I wouldn't ever really want to clash with Doug on purpose. But he said, he streams at 2:30. So anyway, can't be helped. So there's my crashes. Nicely, we've got a nice level on those. That's looking good. Have a quick play just to make sure they do sound all right. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty successful. So I'm not going to do any more freezing. What I'm going to do is, at this point, I'm going to just sort of mix the kit. There's the ride to get a sound on first, but that should not take me long at all. Let's just go to let's solo the ride. In fact, that was strange. Something was playing. Some of the instruments were playing, and play was not lit up. I hadn't pressed play. All right, so there was a little bit of Cubasis anomaly going on there. Not sure what that's about. Okay, so solo my voice. That didn't work. Hang on. Solo my voice. All right. I know what it is. Delete this. And then solo my voice. There. Right. And what that's about is, when you map the nano control to the channels in Cubasis, it's mapping it to the channel number. It's not like, on scene number 3, my 8th fader is not mapped to this microphone that I'm speaking to you on. It is mapped to channel number, what will it be? 9, 18. It's mapped to channel number 27. So because I'd got an extra channel in there, because I'd just frozen the track, it had moved it on one. So when I pressed the solo button, it wasn't soloing, right? It was soloing the wrong channel. So if I so now that I've deleted it off, it's back to normal. So with this button, I can solo my voice, and then I can solo the ride, and then I can go to insert, and I can get Mixbox again. And yes, I am using Mixbox for a lot of things. I've found Mixbox to be by far the most professional sounding suite of effects, if you like, for mixing in iOS, but it's not just that. There are lots of other fabulous effects, but it's just that they're all together in one rack as well. It's infinitely useful. So now you'll see things are starting to move a little bit slow. We are using a lot of DSP. Am I going to be able to open this instance of Mixbox, or am I not? Oh, wait a minute, did I put that on the wrong channel? Wait a minute. What's going on there? Did I not freeze the clap? I thought I'd frozen the clap. Ooh, no, I didn't freeze the clap, did I? Okay. Well, right. So I've opened Mixbox on the wrong channel. So let's get rid of that. So, yes. Go to here. Go to none. Right. Had a little minute there. Right. So now we'll open it on the ride. Never said I was clever. Okay. Now open. Yeah. And I'm going to go to my folder, and my No Pissy Pants ride should be ideal for this. Okay, and we'll lose the reverb right away. Alright, let's just see what this ride is like. Right, okay, so as you can hear, this is maybe a slightly more adventurous kind of a rack's worth of modules in Mixbox for the ride. I'm just going to switch things off in here so I can just very quickly tell you what's happening and why, I suppose. Okay, so we've got a raw sample, and then here's the EQ that I added to it. Right, just kind of takes out this, some low, enhances the upper frequencies that we're wanting to make this ride cut, without kind of, sometimes you get that sort of this an unpleasant frequency you can often end up with when you EQing a ride. But you're trying to push the highs, and you end up with a hiss or a ring. Right, now I put a little echo on, and it's not doing tons. It's not awfully loud in the mix. It's just a little body. And also I really like the tone of this echo, this module. The compression brings up the volume, and of course makes everything much more even. And then I'm using the parametric EQ here to brighten it up once again after the compressor, because I found the compressor sort of, we lost some zing. And that's taking care of those very highs that we really when you hear the ride soloed, it sounds a little bit tinny, but in the mix that's going to work. And then notice how once I add this limiter, you hear the echoes more. And what I like about it is there's some stereo movement from side to side, which is just a pleasing sound to me. So now that I've got that sound, rather than doing any more freezing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a stereo mix of the drums. And this, when I start to mix a track, you know, getting a final, when I'm going for the final mix, I start with getting a real nice drum sound, get that drum kit sounding great, and then build from there. So I'm just going to get my markers at the beginning and end of the track, and then I'll go to the mixer, take off these solos and mutes, and then I want to mute everything off apart from the kit. So I'll just scoot along and do this. And then I'm going to take the volumes of the drums all down apart from the kick, and take the group up to something like 0 dB. Now if I press play, bring the kick up, alright, bring my hat in, didn't go to the beginning of the track like a stupid hippie. Now you'll see I've got the hat panned slightly to the right. It's like R16, and I've just found that's a nice place for the hat to sit. I tend to have like the kick in the middle, the snare just to one side, hats just to the other side. When people make dance music, they often put the hat and the open hat on opposing sides, and that works for electronic music. But when you're mixing something and you want it to sound like a real kit, right, the hat and the open hat are the same instrument, so I put them in exactly the same place. Now in this track I've got them on the same track, but sometimes I do end up with them on separate tracks. Sometimes the sample for one might seem a little bit louder or quieter than the other, so I'll put them on separate tracks so that I can mix the two sounds in the mix. Mix them in the mix. Great sentence. But in this instance I thought they were nice and evenly matched, so I put them on the same track. And so they're panned slightly right, and so the stick will be slightly left. Now maybe could go a little further left. Yeah. Yeah. Right, now what else have we got near the beginning of the track? We've got kick, hats, stick, and some crashes. That's all there is on that bit of the song. So let's just bring the crashes in. Okay, now that sounds nicely okay for now, and it's not really until we start to bring the other instruments in that I need to make fine-tune adjustments. I'm just trying to get a nice general overall picture. So we'll move further on into the track where there are more sounds coming in. Here's where the tambourine kicks in. So this, I am still a little bit anxious about this tambourine sound. Oh, and you'll see what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the tambourine panned to the same place as I have the hats panned, because I don't have the two things playing at the same time. Actually, in a lot of tracks I do that. I'll put a tambourine on where the hi-hat is, and mix it quite low. It just brings a little bit of something extra. But in this track, there's tambourine when there isn't hat, so pan it to the same place. Might as well use that same part of the stereo picture, and that I have already done. I think that tambourine is letting the side down, and it's entirely my fault. Alright, now in this part of the track, this is the chorus, and in this part of the track the snare comes in instead of the stick, so I've got that panned a little to the left as well. Now I did a thing in this chorus where I wanted to have a clap sound, but it didn't feel right putting the clap where the snare would be, and that's something I would quite often do. Instead of using the snare, use a clap, because they're similar types of sounds. But so I found a different place in the bar for the clap, and then it needed a snare as well. So that's why I have both, is what I'm trying to say. I think it might make it work better if I offset the clap, but because the snare is panned to the right, I'm going to find somewhere in the right hand side of the picture to let it sit, and I'm not sure exactly where that should be, so I'm just going to have a pissy pants around with it, and let's just see what it sounds like as I move it around. Maybe it'll work better if I push the snare a little further to the left, like I did with the stick. All right, yeah, I think that sounds nice to me for now. The crash, as you'll see, I have panned dead center, and that's just because, like, over the years I've always just found out that's where I like them to be. It seems, unless you have like a number of crashes, like a whole host of crashes in a track, I find they just sound nice in the center. If you have a lot of different crash sounds, then yeah, you'll be wanting to pan them around the whole stereo picture. So let's bring in that ride and then find a place for that to sit. And usually what I'll do is put the ride on the same side of the kit as the hat, because usually I would have ride or hat, and so that symbol that you've got kick, snare. Usually you've got kick, snare and hat, or you've got kick, snare and ride. In the case of this song, we've got kick, stick and hat, and in the chorus we've got kick, snare and claps and ride. So I'm going to put it on the same side as the hats, but usually I kind of push it a little further out in the stereo picture because it's kind of the ride is a little bit more of a washy kind of sound, more sustained to it, and I find that tends to sound right pushed further to one side, and maybe that's possibly because the way that most people set up a drum kit, they push the ride is like at one side of the kit at the end of a row of toms perhaps. So let's just see. Okay, right, now I've reached a point with this mix now where I've got a little bit of a problem. The DSP is really kind of, it's hitting 100%. I've forgotten how to talk. And you'll notice there I've got some clicking and popping starting to happen. So I've reached a point now where I know that if I try and push Cubasis 3 any further, we're going to have a serious crash. So I think I'm reaching a point where I'm going to leave off with this stream for today. But before I go, let me explain. I think what I'm going to do is I will, once I've ended the stream, I will probably save one of my Mixbox presets and then close Mixbox to save some DSP, and then freeze the other drums. I don't want to do any more freezing in this stream because it makes it a bit tedious for you guys. So I will freeze off those drums, and then I will get some sounds for the congas and freeze those off, and then I will be ready to mix. And so what I think I'll do then is I will stream one last time for this track tomorrow, and I will just show you how the mix has ended up, show you some sort of a few final points and pointers and things. And I'm not saying that at that point I will have an absolutely finished mix, but I'll have something that's very much approaching it. And you see, the thing is when it comes to a mix, I like to sit with a mix for a few days, so I'll get a mix that I think is finished, and then I'll leave it, and then I'll come and listen to it the next morning when I come into my studio. First thing, with fresh ears, I'll listen to it again, and I'll make some adjustments, and I'll do that for a few days until I'm happy that it's okay. If it's a much simpler track, it'll be a much quicker process, obviously. But that's where I'm at with this one, and that's what I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to leave it there, and I will stream once again at lunchtime tomorrow to share that finished mix with you, or approaching finished mix with you. Okay, so thank you ever so much, everyone who has stuck with me. Everyone who's watched today, and those of you who have stuck with me since Doug started to stream, thanks ever so much. I really, really appreciate it. So until tomorrow's stream, take care of yourselves, make some great music, and be good people, and don't pissy pants about. See you later.